Taeyang wiped the grease from his hands and stared at the cargo manifest on his datapad. Another boring run to the outer stations. His ship, the Wandering Star, wasn't much to look at, but she flew well enough to keep him fed. At 28 years old, he had spent the last decade hauling supplies across the frontier of human space. It was lonely work, but he preferred it that way. The way station buzzed with activity as ships came and went. Taeyang had docked here 100 times before. He knew which vendors sold the best ration packs and which mechanics would cheat him. He was checking fuel prices when the alarms started screaming. Red lights flashed across every screen in the station. People started running. Taeyang looked up to see a sleek diplomatic vessel surrounded by smaller attack ships. Weapons fire lit up the darkness of space outside the station's windows. This wasn't a random pirate raid. Someone wanted that diplomatic ship destroyed. Most people ran away from danger. Taeyang had learned long ago that sometimes running wasn't enough. He sprinted toward the docking bay, his boots pounding against the metal floor. Station security was nowhere to be seen. The attack ships had disabled the diplomatic vessel's engines. It was only a matter of time before they breached the hull. Through the window, Taeyang watched as armed figures in black armor forced their way inside the diplomatic ship. His hands clenched into fists. He should leave. This wasn't his problem, but something in his chest wouldn't let him walk away. He reached his ship and grabbed his emergency kit from the storage locker. Inside was a pistol, a medical scanner, and a breather mask. Not much, but it would have to do. Taeyang sealed his flight suit and launched the Wandering Star from the dock. Station control was screaming at him to return, but he ignored their warnings. The diplomatic vessel was Valerian, he realized. The aliens were known across the galaxy for their advanced technology and rigid social structure. They looked down on humans as primitive newcomers to space travel. Taeyang had dealt with enough Valerian traders to know they considered his species barely worth acknowledging. But that didn't matter right now. Someone was dying on that ship. Taeyang maneuvered his cargo hauler close to the diplomatic vessel's emergency airlock. The attackers were too focused on their targets inside to notice one small human ship approaching. He sealed the airlocks together and forced the door open with an emergency override. The smell of burnt circuits and blood hit him immediately. Bodies lay scattered in the corridor. Valerian guards in ceremonial armor had fought hard, but they'd been overwhelmed. Taeyang moved quickly, his pistol raised. He heard voices ahead speaking in a language he didn't understand. Then he heard something else. A female voice, defiant even in fear. He rounded the corner and saw her. A young Valerian woman in elaborate robes stood cornered by 3 attackers. Her pale blue skin was splattered with purple blood. She held a broken energy blade in one hand, still fighting even though she was clearly injured. One of the attackers raised his weapon to finish her. Taeyang didn't think. He just acted. His first shot took down the nearest attacker. The other 2 spun around in surprise. Humans weren't supposed to be here. Humans weren't supposed to interfere in alien politics. Their hesitation cost them their lives. The Valerian woman stared at him with wide golden eyes. She spoke in her own language, words he couldn't understand. Then she collapsed. Taeyang caught her before she hit the ground. The medical scanner showed severe injuries. She wouldn't survive without treatment. More attackers were coming. Taeyang could hear their boots in the corridors. He scooped the unconscious woman into his arms and ran back to his ship. She was surprisingly light, her bones hollow like a bird's. He secured her in the medical bay and sealed the airlock just as weapons fire scorched the hull. The Wandering Star shook as Taeyang threw her into full acceleration. Attack ships pursued him, their weapons far superior to anything his cargo hauler possessed. He dove toward the nearby asteroid field, a maze of floating rocks that would tear apart anyone foolish enough to enter at high speed. Taeyang had been foolish many times before. He knew these asteroids. He'd hidden in them from pirates and tax collectors. The cargo hauler twisted and turned, scraping past rocks that would have crushed a larger ship. Behind him, one attack ship tried to follow. It clipped an asteroid and exploded in a ball of fire. The others broke off pursuit, unwilling to risk the dangerous field. Only when he was deep in the asteroids did Taeyang allow himself to breathe. His hands were shaking. The adrenaline was wearing off and pain flared in his side. He looked down to see a burn wound across his ribs. One of the attackers had hit him, and he hadn't even noticed in the chaos. He stumbled to the medical bay where the Valerian woman lay unconscious on the treatment bed. The ship's basic medical system was doing what it could, but it wasn't designed for alien physiology. Taeyang applied pressure to her worst wounds and injected her with a broad-spectrum healing gel. It might work. It might kill her. He had no idea. For 3 hours, he monitored her vital signs while hiding in the asteroid field. The scanners showed search ships combing the area, but none came close to finding his hiding spot. When the woman's breathing finally stabilized, Taeyang allowed himself to close his eyes for just a moment. He woke to find golden eyes staring at him. The Valerian woman was conscious, propped up on one elbow. She spoke in her musical language, then frowned when he didn't respond. She tried again in another language, then another. Finally, she spoke in heavily accented but understandable human common tongue. "You are human," she said, as if she couldn't quite believe it. "A human saved me." "Yeah," Taeyang replied, suddenly exhausted. Seemed like the right thing to do. She studied him for a long moment. Her expression was impossible to read. Then she said something that would change his life forever. "I am Princess Hana, daughter of Empress Mirai, heir to the Valerian Empire. You have saved my life, human. My mother will want to know your name." Taeyang looked at the injured alien princess in his medical bay, at the burn wound on his own side, at the damaged systems flickering on his ship's controls. He thought about the attack ships still searching for them, about the trouble he'd just brought down on his head. "Taeyang," he said finally. "My name is Taeyang, and I think we're both in serious trouble." The wandering star drifted through empty space, running dark to avoid detection. Taeyang had disabled all non-essential systems to reduce their energy signature. In the dim emergency lighting, he could see Princess Hana sitting at the navigation console, her face pale with concentration. 3 days had passed since the rescue. 3 days of running, hiding, and trying to stay alive. The princess's wounds were healing, but slowly. Taeyang's medical supplies were nearly exhausted and food was running low. Worse, every station they approached turned them away. Word had spread across the sector that a human had kidnapped the Valerian princess. "They think you took me by force," Hana said, scrolling through the bounty notices. Her human common tongue was improving rapidly. "The official story says you attacked the diplomatic vessel." Taeyang snorted. "Of course they do. Truth doesn't matter when politics are involved." Hana turned to look at him. She wore one of his spare flight suits now, her royal robes too damaged to repair. Without her ceremonial clothing, she looked younger, more vulnerable. "Why did you save me? Your species has no alliance with mine. You knew it would bring you trouble. I told you already. It was the right thing to do." "That is not an answer." Taeyang leaned back in his pilot chair, staring at the stars beyond the viewport. "When I was 10, raiders attacked my colony. They killed most of the adults, including my parents. My sister and I hid in a storage container for 2 days. We would have died if a passing cargo captain hadn't stopped to investigate." Hana was silent, waiting for him to continue. That captain had no reason to check a destroyed colony. It was dangerous and there was no profit in it. But he did it anyway and he saved us. My sister died from her injuries 3 days later, but at least she didn't die alone in that container. Taeyang's voice was steady. He'd told this story in his head 1,000 times, but never out loud. "I learned something that day. Sometimes being human means doing the right thing even when it's stupid." The princess studied him with those strange golden eyes. "Your species is very different from mine." "Yeah, we noticed." An alarm beeped softly. Taeyang checked the sensors and cursed. 3 ships were approaching their position. Too small to be military vessels, too well armed to be merchants. Bounty hunters. "Strap in," he ordered, bringing the engines online. "This is going to get rough." The wandering star accelerated away from the hunters, but the cargo hauler was never built for speed. The pursuing ships closed the distance quickly. Weapons fire streaked past the viewport. Taeyang dove toward a nearby moon, skimming so close to the surface that the ship's hull scraped against the atmosphere. "What are you doing?" Hana gripped her restraints, her knuckles white. "Improvising." He led the hunters into a narrow canyon, the walls close enough to touch on both sides. The bounty hunters followed, their smaller ships more maneuverable in the tight space. But Taeyang had grown up flying through asteroid fields and debris zones. He knew how to make a clumsy cargo hauler dance. At the last second, he pulled straight up. The canyon walls converged ahead, too narrow for any ship to pass through. 2 of the hunters tried to follow his maneuver but weren't fast enough. They clipped the canyon walls and exploded in twin fireballs. The 3rd hunter broke off, circling around to find another approach. "We cannot keep running forever," Hana said. We need supplies, fuel, and proper medical care. I know a place, Taeyang replied. It's not much, but the people there owe me favors. The asteroid station was barely more than a collection of old mining equipment welded together. It operated outside any government jurisdiction, a haven for smugglers, criminals, and people who asked no questions. Taeyang docked at an airlock that looked like it might fall apart at any moment. Stay close to me, he told Hana. Don't talk to anyone unless I say it's safe. The station's interior was dark and smelled of oil and recycled air. Aliens of a dozen species filled the corridors, along with a few rough-looking humans. Taeyang kept one hand near his pistol as he guided Hana through the crowd. Eyes followed them, calculating and dangerous. They found the mechanics shop in the deepest part of the station. A heavy-set human woman looked up from her work, her face breaking into a smile when she saw Taeyang. Well, look what the void dragged in, she said. Thought you were dead, Tae. Not yet, Yunji, though it's been close a few times. Yunji's eyes shifted to Hana, and her smile faded. That's the Valerian princess, the one everyone's looking for. Yeah. You've really done it this time. But despite her words, Yunji was already moving toward the princess, pulling out a medical scanner. She needs proper treatment. That wound in her side is infected. While Yunji worked on Hana's injuries, Taeyang negotiated for supplies. It took most of his remaining credits and a promise of future favors, but he secured food, fuel, and medicine. He was loading the last container when the shooting started. Bounty hunters had found them. A dozen armed figures poured into the mechanics shop, weapons raised. Yunji dove for cover, cursing loudly. Taeyang grabbed his pistol and returned fire, but they were outnumbered and outgunned. Then something unexpected happened. Princess Hana picked up a plasma cutter from Yunji's workbench and ignited it. The tool wasn't meant to be a weapon, but in her hands it became one. She moved with surprising speed, her royal training finally showing. Despite her injuries, she fought with precision and grace. Taeyang had never seen a Valerian fight before. They were supposed to be soft, aristocratic, more concerned with etiquette than survival. But Hana moved like a dancer, each motion efficient and deadly. Together, they drove the bounty hunters back into the corridor. Go, Yunji shouted, sealing the shop door behind them. I'll hold them off. Get out of here! Taeyang and Hana ran for the wandering star. More bounty hunters appeared, blocking their path. Taeyang's pistol was almost empty. They weren't going to make it. Hana grabbed his arm and pulled him down a side corridor. This way. Trust me. He followed her through a maze of passages. She seemed to know exactly where she was going, reading the station's layout with an ease that surprised him. They emerged near the docking bay just as the bounty hunters caught up. A firefight erupted in the narrow corridor. Taeyang felt a burning pain in his shoulder as a shot grazed him. He kept firing, covering Hana as she opened the airlock to his ship. They tumbled inside together, and the wandering star launched with emergency power. In the safety of space, Taeyang collapsed into the pilot chair, breathing hard. His shoulder burned. Hana appeared beside him with the medical kit, her hand steady as she treated his wound. You're getting good at patching me up, he said through gritted teeth. I have had much practice lately. Her voice was soft. Thank you, Taeyang, for saving me. Again. Yeah, well, you saved me back there too. That makes us even. Hana smiled for the first time since he'd rescued her. It transformed her face, making her look less like a distant princess and more like a young woman who'd found an unexpected friend. No, she said. I do not think we are even, but perhaps we are becoming partners. Taeyang looked at her, this alien princess who'd fought beside him, who'd learned to survive in his rough world. Maybe she was right. Maybe they were becoming something more than prisoner and rescuer. Maybe they were becoming allies. He just hoped they lived long enough to figure out what that meant. The research outpost floated in orbit around a dead planet, unmarked on most star charts. Taeyang had learned about it years ago from a scientist he'd helped smuggle past corporate security. The man had promised that if Taeyang ever needed help, this place would be safe. He hoped that promise still held true. As the wandering star approached, a signal pinged his communication system. A familiar voice came through the speakers. Taeyang? Is that really you? The whole galaxy thinks you kidnapped a princess. Hi, Daeho, can we come aboard before you decide if that's true? There was a pause, then a laugh. Yeah, come on. But you better have one hell of a story. The outpost was small, designed for a crew of maybe 20 scientists. Most of the space was dedicated to laboratories studying alien biology and xenobotany. Daeho met them at the airlock. A thin human man in his 40s with kind eyes and perpetually messy hair. His expression changed when he saw Princess Hana. "Oh, you actually do have the Valerian princess with you." "It's not what you think," Taeyang started, but Hana interrupted. "He saved my life. Twice now. The kidnapping story is false, created by my enemies to prevent my return home." Daeho studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Okay, come on. Both of you need medical attention and food. We can sort out the politics later." The outpost's facilities were far better than anything on the Wandering Star. A medical AI scanned their injuries and began proper treatment. Taeyang's shoulder wound was worse than he'd thought, infected from the dirty environment of the asteroid station. Hana's side injury, despite Yunji's treatment, still needed specialized care. For the first time in days, they could rest. Taeyang woke 12 hours later in a small room with clean sheets and artificial gravity that didn't shift every few minutes. He found Hana in the observation lounge, staring out at the stars. She wore medical wraps under a borrowed lab coat, looking odd and out of place. "Daeho says he can contact your people," Taeyang said, sitting beside her. "Loyal ones, not whoever orchestrated the attack." "I know. He explained it to me." Hana didn't look away from the stars. "Once they arrive, you will be free. You can return to your life." Something in her voice made his chest tight. "Yeah, that's good news. Is it?" Taeyang didn't know how to answer that. A week ago, he would have said yes immediately. His life was simple, uncomplicated. Now, sitting beside this alien princess, he wasn't sure what he wanted. "Tell me about your music," Hana said suddenly. "Human music. On the ship, I heard you playing something on the audio system. It was beautiful, sad but beautiful. You liked that. I thought Valerians considered human art primitive. Many do. But I'm not asking what my people think. I'm asking what I think." She turned to look at him, her golden eyes intense. "I want to understand humans. To understand you." Over the next 3 days, they talked. Really talked for the first time without running or fighting. Taeyang showed her his collection of old Earth music, songs from before humanity reached the stars. He explained poetry, showed her paintings saved on his datapad, and told her stories his mother had told him as a child. Hana absorbed it all with an eagerness that surprised him. She asked questions constantly, trying to understand the emotions behind the art. Valerian culture valued logic and efficiency. They had art, but it was mathematical, perfect, cold. Human art was messy, emotional, and alive. "This song," she said, listening to an ancient ballad about lost love. "The singer sounds like his heart is breaking. That's kind of the point. But why? Why would anyone want to feel such pain?" Taeyang thought about it. Because feeling something, even pain, means you're alive. It means you've experienced something real. Valerians might have perfect lives, but do you actually live them? Hana was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Before you saved me, I had never made a real choice. Everything was decided, my education, my clothes, my schedule, who I would marry. Even my emotions were supposed to follow proper protocols." She looked at her hands. "I am 24 years old and I have never decided anything important for myself." "Who are you supposed to marry?" "Prince Hyunwoo of the Keltharian Empire. Our marriage will unite two powerful civilizations. It has been arranged since I was born." Her voice was flat, emotionless. "I have met him 3 times. He is handsome, educated, and treats me like a valuable piece of furniture." Sounds terrible. It is practical. Love is not necessary for a successful political marriage. But the way she said it made it clear she didn't believe her own words. Taeyang wanted to say something comforting. But what could he say? He was a cargo pilot. She was a princess. Their worlds were so different they might as well be different species, which technically they were. "When I am recovered," Hana said quietly, "and my mother's fleet arrives, you should come with us." "To the Valerian homeworld?" "They'd probably arrest me." "No, I would explain everything. You would be honored, rewarded." "I don't want rewards." "Then come because—" She hesitated, something uncertain flickering across her face. "Because I want you to. These days with you have been the freest I have ever felt. When I return to the palace, that freedom will end, unless you are there." Before Taeyang could respond, Daeho rushed into the lounge, his face pale. "I made contact with the Valerian palace. The Empress is sending a fleet. They'll be here in 2 days." "That is good news," Hana said. Maybe, but Taeyang, there's something you should know. The Empress didn't just thank me and confirm the pickup. She asked very specific questions about you. What you did, how you fought, your background. Daeho looked worried. She's interested in you. Very interested. I've studied Valerian culture for years, and that kind of interest from Empress Mirai is complicated. What do you mean? Taeyang asked. The Empress is known for being brilliant and strategic. She doesn't do anything without multiple reasons. If she's focusing on you, it means she has plans. Plans for a random human cargo pilot. Plans for the human who saved her daughter and evaded capture for a week. You've done what most Valerian soldiers couldn't do. That makes you interesting. And in Valerian court, being interesting to the Empress can be very dangerous. Hana stood abruptly. My mother would not harm him. He saved my life. I didn't say she'd harm him, Daeho replied. I said she has plans. There's a difference. That night Taeyang couldn't sleep. He found Hana on the observation deck again, staring at the planet below. I've been thinking, he said. Maybe I shouldn't come with you. Your world, your politics, that's not my life. I don't belong there. You belong wherever you choose to be. Do I? Or do I belong wherever someone more powerful decides? He moved closer to her. Hana, you're going back to an arranged marriage, to a life where your choices aren't your own. I can't help you with that. I'm nobody. She turned to face him, and there were tears in her golden eyes. Taeyang hadn't known Valerians could cry. You are not nobody, she said fiercely. You are the only person who has ever treated me like I matter. Not as a princess, not as a political tool, but as a person. Do you know how rare that is? I just did what anyone should do. But no one else did. She reached out and took his hand. Her skin was cool, smooth, so different from human skin. When my mother arrives, everything will change. I know this, but these few days here with you I have been happy. Truly happy. Can you not give me that much? Taeyang looked at their joined hands, human and alien, and felt something shift in his chest. He knew this was stupid. He knew staying close to her would only bring pain. But looking into her eyes, he couldn't bring himself to pull away. Okay, he said softly. I'll come with you. At least until I'm sure you're safe. Hana smiled through her tears. Thank you, Taeyang. 2 days later, the Valerian fleet arrived. Dozens of ships, each one more advanced than anything humanity had ever built. And at the center, the Empress's flagship, massive and terrifying in its beauty. Daeho gripped Taeyang's shoulder. Good luck. You're going to need it. As the Imperial shuttle approached the outpost, Taeyang watched the stars and wondered what he'd just agreed to. He'd saved a princess, earned her friendship, and maybe something more. Now he was about to meet her mother, one of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. He had a feeling his simple life as a cargo pilot was over for good. The Imperial shuttle was unlike anything Taeyang had ever seen. The interior gleamed with materials that seemed to shift colors in the light. Everything was designed to remind visitors that they were in the presence of greatness. He felt very small and very human. 2 royal guards flanked him, their armor pristine and their faces hidden behind helmets. They hadn't spoken since escorting him from the research outpost. Hana had been taken separately, whisked away to reunite with her mother. Taeyang was alone with aliens who probably saw him as barely civilized. The shuttle docked with the flagship, and the guards led him through corridors that belonged in a palace, not a spaceship. Other Valerians stopped to stare at him, their golden eyes filled with curiosity or disdain. He heard whispers in their musical language, none of which he understood. Finally, they reached a massive door that opened into a throne room, and there, seated on a chair that seemed carved from a single piece of crystal, was Empress Mirai. She was older than her daughter, but no less beautiful. Her pale blue skin was marked with silver patterns that denoted her royal status. She wore robes that seemed to be made of liquid starlight, and her presence filled the entire room. This was a woman who had ruled an empire for decades, who commanded fleets and decided the fate of billions. Princess Hana stood beside her mother's throne, looking small and uncertain in fresh royal clothing. When she saw Taeyang, relief flashed across her face. Approach, the Empress said. Her voice was cold and commanding. She spoke perfect human common tongue without accent. Taeyang walked forward, very aware that dozens of guards and courtiers watched his every move. He stopped a respectful distance from the throne, unsure if he should bow. He'd never met royalty before. You are the human called Taeyang, Mirai said. It wasn't a question. Yes, Your Majesty. You saved my daughter's life. You fought trained assassins, evaded capture, and protected her for 7 days with limited resources. The Empress's golden eyes studied him like he was a specimen under a microscope. Tell me, human, why did you do this? Because it was the right thing to do. A murmur went through the court. Apparently that answer surprised them. The Empress's expression didn't change. The right thing, she repeated. You risked your life, your freedom, your future because it was right. Yes. And you expect no reward? No payment for your service? I expect nothing, Your Majesty. I'm just glad Princess Hana is safe. Mireille stood and the entire court seemed to hold its breath. She descended from her throne and walked toward Taiyang. Up close, she was even more intimidating. She circled him slowly, examining him from every angle. My daughter tells me you are brave, resourceful, and honorable. She says you treated her not as a princess, but as a person. She says you showed her what it means to truly live. The Empress stopped in front of him. She also says you play music that made her cry. Is this true? Taeyang glanced at Hana, who looked embarrassed. I played some old Earth songs. She seemed to like them. Music that makes one feel, Mireille said thoughtfully. How very human. My people have forgotten how to feel. We have become too focused on logic, on perfection. Perhaps that is why we failed to protect my daughter while you, with your primitive weapons and old ships, succeeded. I wouldn't say failed, Your Majesty. The circumstances do not defend my guards. They are ashamed enough. Mireille's voice hardened. The attack on my daughter was orchestrated by members of my own court. Traitors who sought to prevent her marriage and destabilize my empire. They chose that moment because they believed she would be vulnerable. They did not account for you. She raised her voice so the entire court could hear. By the ancient laws of the Valerian Empire, any person who saves a royal's life and sheds blood in their defense becomes blade-bound. This is a sacred position, an honor that cannot be refused. Taiyang felt his stomach drop. Your Majesty, I don't understand. It means, human, that you now belong to me. You are bound by law to serve as protector to my daughter and to the royal house. This bond cannot be broken except by death. Mireille's eyes gleamed with something that might have been satisfaction. You are mine, Taiyang. You are claimed. The court erupted in shocked whispers. Hana stepped forward, her face pale. Mother, he is not one of our people. Surely the ancient law does not apply. The law makes no distinction of species. A life saved is a life owed. Mireille turned to her daughter. Or would you rather send away the one person who has proven he would die to keep you safe? Hana fell silent, torn between protecting Taiyang and admitting she didn't want him to leave. Taiyang found his voice. What if I refuse? The court gasped. Apparently no one refused the Empress, but Mireille simply smiled, a cold expression that didn't reach her eyes. Then you would insult the crown, dishonor my daughter, and break sacred law. Your species values honor, does it not? You speak of doing the right thing. Is it right to abandon someone you've sworn to protect? Because make no mistake, human, when you chose to save Hana, you made that oath whether you spoke the words or not. Taiyang's hands clenched into fists. She'd trapped him perfectly. If he left, he would be abandoning Hana to the same enemies who'd tried to kill her. He'd be proving that his honor meant nothing. But if he stayed, he'd be giving up his freedom, his life, everything he'd known. He looked at Hana. She was staring at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Fear? Hope? Guilt? Maybe all three. If I agree, he said slowly. What exactly does this blade-bound thing mean? You will be assigned quarters in the palace. You will receive training in Valerian customs and combat techniques. You will be responsible for my daughter's safety at all times. Mireille's voice was formal now, reciting law. You will attend court functions, advise on security matters, and serve the crown in whatever capacity I deem necessary. In exchange, you will receive honor, position, and protection under royal law. Sounds like a fancy prison. It is what you make of it, human. You are not a servant. The blade-bound are among the most respected positions in our empire. You would have authority second only to the royal family itself. Taiyang laughed bitterly. I'm a cargo pilot. I haul supplies for a living. I don't know anything about court politics or protecting princesses. You learned quickly enough when it mattered. Mireille moved closer, lowering her voice so only he could hear. I am not a fool, Taiyang. I see what is happening between you and my daughter. I see how she looks at you, how she speaks of you. Do you think I brought an entire fleet just to retrieve her? I came to meet you, to evaluate whether you are worthy. Worthy of what? That remains to be seen. But understand this, my daughter faces enemies on all sides. She is engaged to a prince I do not trust, surrounded by courtiers who scheme for power, and she is too naive to protect herself. She needs someone loyal, someone who cannot be bought or threatened, someone who sees her as a person, not a prize. The Empress's eyes bored into his. She needs you. Whether you want this role or not, you are the only one who can fill it. Taiyang looked past the Empress to where Hana stood. She was watching them, her hands clasped together, trying to appear calm but clearly terrified of what he might say. He thought about his simple life, flying between stations, never staying in one place too long, never letting anyone close. It had been safe. Lonely but safe. This would be the opposite of safe. This would be complicated and dangerous and would probably get him killed. But when he thought about leaving Hana alone in this world of politics and assassins, something in his chest hurt. Okay, he said finally. I'll do it. I'll be whatever this blade-bound thing is, but I have one condition. The court gasped again. Making demands of the Empress was apparently unthinkable. But Mirai just raised an eyebrow, looking almost amused. Speak. If I'm going to protect Princess Hana, I do it my way. Human way. I'm not going to follow every stupid protocol or tradition if it puts her in danger. You want me to keep her alive? Then you trust me to make the right calls. For a long moment, Mirai said nothing. Then she smiled, a real smile this time. You are either very brave or very foolish, human. Possibly both. She turned to address the court. I accept this condition. Taiyang of the human species is hereby declared blade-bound to Princess Hana and the royal house. Let any who oppose this declare themselves now or forever hold their silence. No one spoke, though many looked unhappy about it. Mirai turned back to Taiyang. Welcome to the Valerian court, human. I hope you survive long enough to prove interesting. As guards came forward to escort him away, Taiyang caught Hana's eye. She mouthed 2 words, thank you. He nodded slightly. He'd just given up his freedom, his old life, everything he knew. All to protect an alien princess he'd known for less than 2 weeks. He really hoped she was worth it. The Valerian homeworld was beautiful in a way that made Taiyang's chest ache. Cities of crystalline light stretched across continents, connected by transit systems that defied human engineering. 3 moons hung in the sky, and everything seemed designed to showcase the Empire's wealth and power. The royal palace was at the planet's capital, a structure so massive it could be seen from orbit. Taiyang's new quarters were in the eastern wing, rooms that would have housed 10 people comfortably on a human station. He had a bedroom, a study, a training room, and a view of gardens that seemed to go on forever. It was the nicest prison he'd ever seen. A Valerian servant arrived on his 2nd day with formal clothing. The outfit was made from materials worth more than his ship had been, designed to mark him as blade-bound. When he looked in the mirror, he barely recognized himself. This is ridiculous, he muttered. You look very distinguished, said a voice from the doorway. Hana stood there wearing her own formal robes. She'd been avoiding him since they arrived, caught up in medical treatments and official duties. This was the first time they'd been alone in days. Distinguished isn't really my style. You will adjust. Everyone does eventually. But she didn't sound convinced. Taiyang studied her. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and she held herself with the rigid posture of someone under constant scrutiny. The free, happy woman from the research outpost was gone, replaced by the perfect princess. Are you okay? He asked. I'm fine. Why would I not be? Because you look miserable. Hana's composure cracked slightly. I am home. I should be grateful. Should be isn't the same as actually being. Taiyang moved closer. Talk to me, Hana. What's wrong? She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, Prince Hyunwoo arrives in 3 days. The formal betrothal ceremonies will begin. My mother has scheduled 8 different events, each requiring me to smile and pretend I am honored to marry a man I barely know. Can't you tell her you don't want to? It is not that simple. This marriage secures peace between our empires. Millions of lives depend on it. She looked at him with those golden eyes. How can I be selfish when so much is at stake? How can you not be? It's your life, Hana. My life was never my own. You know this. Before Taiyang could respond, another figure appeared in the doorway, a tall Valerian woman in military armor. Her face marked with scars that spoke of real combat experience. Princess, she said, bowing slightly. The Empress requires your presence. Training protocols for the human begin in 1 hour. Hana nodded and left without another word. The warrior woman turned her attention to Taiyang, studying him with critical eyes. I am Commander Jiwan, head of the Royal Guard. You will train with me each morning until you understand how to protect the princess properly. I've done okay so far, Taiyang pointed out. You survived through luck and human stubbornness. That will not be sufficient here. Jiwan's expression was stern but not unkind. The threats in the palace are more subtle than assassins with guns. You must learn to see them. Over the following weeks, Taiyang learned that Jiwan was right. Palace life was a battlefield where the weapons were words, glances, and careful political maneuvering. Every conversation had layers of meaning. Every social gathering was a chance for rivals to gain advantage. The courtiers treated him with barely concealed disdain. He was human, primitive, unworthy of his position. They spoke in their own language around him, making jokes they assumed he wouldn't understand. When he proved capable of learning Valerian faster than expected, they simply became more creative with their insults. Only a few people treated him with respect. Jiwan, who valued competence over species, a young scholar named Sunwoo, who was fascinated by human culture. And of course Hana, during the rare moments they were alone. But those moments became increasingly rare. The princess was scheduled every hour of every day preparing for her marriage. Taiyang attended some events as her guardian, standing in the background while nobles pretended he didn't exist. He watched Hana smile and nod and say all the right things, slowly disappearing behind her royal mask. It was driving him crazy. You seem frustrated, Jiwan observed during their morning training. They were in the practice arena where she was teaching him Valerian combat techniques. He'd just thrown his training weapon across the room. How do you stand it? All the fake smiles and political games. I focus on what matters. The princess's safety. Jiwan picked up the weapon and handed it back to him. Everything else is noise. She's not safe. Not really. She's being forced into a marriage she doesn't want. That is not a matter of physical safety. Isn't it? What if this prince is dangerous? What if he's connected to the assassination attempt? Jiwan's expression darkened. I have had similar concerns. But without proof, there is nothing I can do. The Empress has investigated Prince Hyunwoo thoroughly. He appears clean. Appears. That's not the same as actually being clean. No, Jiwan agreed quietly. It is not. That evening, the Empress summoned Taiyang to her private study. It was a smaller room than he expected, filled with star charts and strategic reports. Mirai sat behind a desk made of dark wood. Something from Earth, he realized. She'd imported furniture from his homeworld. Sit, she commanded. Taiyang sat, uncomfortable under her analytical gaze. You have been here 3 weeks, Mirai said. Tell me your assessment of the palace security. It's terrible. The Empress raised an eyebrow. Explain. Your guards are well trained for direct combat, but they're not prepared for deception. Everything here is about appearances and protocol. That makes people blind to real threats. Taiyang leaned forward. The assassination attempt on Hana succeeded because no one expected betrayal from within. You've increased security, but you haven't changed the culture that allowed the betrayal in the first place. And how would you change it? I wouldn't trust anyone. I'd verify every guard, every servant, every noble who gets close to Hana. I'd assume everyone is a potential threat until proven otherwise. That is a very human way of thinking. Paranoid. Paranoid keeps people alive. Mirai studied him for a long moment. Prince Hyunwoo arrives tomorrow. You will be at every event, watching him. If you see anything suspicious, report directly to me. Not to the guards, not to anyone else. Only me. You suspect him too. I suspect everyone, human. You have taught me the value of paranoia. She smiled coldly. Now prove to me that my daughter's trust in you is justified. The next day, Prince Hyunwoo arrived with great ceremony. He was everything a prince should be. Handsome, educated, charming. His pale purple skin marked him as Keltharian royalty, and his golden robe sparkled with embedded jewels. When he greeted Hana, he kissed her hand with perfect protocol. Taiyang watched from his position near the wall and saw what no one else seemed to notice. The prince's smile never reached his eyes. His touch on Hana's hand was possessive rather than gentle, and when he thought no one was looking, his gaze swept the room with calculating coldness. This man was dangerous. Taiyang knew it in his bones. Over the next several days, Taiyang observed the prince carefully. Hyungwoo was always perfectly polite, always said the right things. But small details bothered Taeyang. The way the prince's guards watched Hana with barely concealed hostility, the private conversations that ended abruptly when anyone approached, the subtle comments about how the princess would need to adjust to her new life. At a formal dinner, Taeyang stood behind Hana's chair while she and the prince discussed their upcoming union. Hyunwoo was describing the Keltharian palace where they would live. "Of course you will need to adopt our customs," he said smoothly. "Valerian ways are too soft for our court. But do not worry, my dear. I will teach you proper discipline." Hana's hands tightened on her utensils, but she kept her voice calm. "I look forward to learning about your culture, my prince." "Excellent. And I trust this human will not be accompanying you. Blade-bound or not, I cannot have primitive species cluttering my palace." Taeyang felt his jaw clench, but before he could speak, Hana responded, "Taeyang goes where I go. He is bound to me by sacred law." The prince's smile grew cold. "We shall see about that." That night, Taeyang found Hana on her private balcony, staring at the moons. She was crying silently, tears streaming down her blue cheeks. "Hana, do not," she whispered. "Do not say anything kind. I cannot bear it right now." He sat beside her anyway, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "You don't have to marry him." "Yes, I do. For peace. For my empire. For everyone except yourself." Taeyang turned to look at her. "What if I told you the prince is planning something? What if I said he's connected to the assassination attempt?" She went very still. "Do you have proof?" "Not yet. But I will." He reached out and took her hand, not caring if anyone saw. "I didn't agree to protect you just to watch you walk into another trap. Trust me, Hana. Give me time to find the truth." She squeezed his hand, her cool skin against his warm palm. "I trust you, Taeyang. I always have." They sat together under 3 moons, knowing the palace watched, knowing scandal would follow. But for that moment, neither of them cared. The grand ballroom glittered with light from 1,000 crystalline chandeliers. Nobles from across the empire had gathered to celebrate the formal betrothal of Princess Hana and Prince Hyunwoo. Musicians played complex harmonies that hurt Taeyang's human ears, and servants circulated with drinks that shimmered with colors he'd never seen before. Taeyang stood in his formal blade-bound uniform, watching everything from his position near the main entrance. He'd spent the past week investigating the prince's activities, but finding proof had been impossible. Hyunwoo was too careful, too well protected by his own guards and political connections. But tonight felt wrong. The prince was too relaxed, too confident. Something was going to happen. Hana stood beside Hyunwoo on the ceremonial platform, looking beautiful and miserable in her betrothal gown. The prince held her hand possessively, showing her off to the gathered nobles like a prize he'd won. When he thought no one was looking, his grip tightened until Hana's face showed pain. Taeyang's hands clenched. He wanted to cross the room and break the prince's arm. Only Jiwon's warning glance kept him in place. Starting a diplomatic incident wouldn't help anyone. The empress stood on her throne, presiding over the ceremony with regal dignity. She looked pleased, but Taeyang had learned to read her subtle expressions. She was tense, watching everything carefully. She sensed it too, something was wrong. The ceremony reached its peak. Hyunwoo and Hana were supposed to exchange formal vows, binding themselves in a contract that would be difficult to break. As the prince raised his hand to make the first oath, the lights went out. Screams filled the darkness. Taeyang moved instantly, muscle memory from years of survival taking over. He pushed through the panicked crowd toward where Hana had been standing. Energy weapons fired in the darkness, their flashes illuminating chaos. He reached the platform just as emergency lighting flickered on. Assassins in black armor swarmed through the ballroom, cutting down guards and nobles indiscriminately. But their main target was clear. They converged on Hana. Taeyang grabbed the princess and pulled her behind a pillar just as a blast scorched the air where she'd been standing. She was frozen with shock, unable to process what was happening. He shook her once hard. "Hana, stay with me." She focused on his face and nodded. More assassins appeared. Taeyang had only his ceremonial blade, a weapon more decorative than functional. But he'd fought with worse. The first assassin fell to a slash across the throat. The second took a kick to the knee that shattered bone, followed by a blade through the visor. Jiwon appeared with a squad of royal guards, cutting through assassins with brutal efficiency. "Get the princess to safety!" she shouted. Taeyang didn't need to be told twice. He grabbed Hana's hand and ran, pulling her through the chaos. Behind them, the battle intensified. He heard Jiwan shouting orders, the Empress commanding her guards, and underneath it all the screams of the dying. They burst into a side corridor, but more assassins blocked their path. Taeyang shoved Hana behind him and prepared to fight, knowing they were outnumbered and outgunned. Then something unexpected happened. Prince Hyunwoo appeared from another corridor, his own guards with him. For a moment, Taeyang thought they were saved. Then he saw the prince's expression, cold calculation instead of concern. "Kill them both," Hyunwoo ordered his guards. "Make it look like the assassins did it." The prince's guards raised their weapons. In that instant, everything became clear. Hyunwoo had orchestrated both assassination attempts. He wanted Hana dead so he could claim her territories without the complication of a living wife. The first attempt had failed because of Taeyang. The second attempt, during the chaos of the celebration, should have succeeded. But the prince hadn't counted on human stubbornness. Taeyang grabbed a fallen energy rifle and opened fire. His shots weren't as accurate as a trained soldier's, but in the narrow corridor, accuracy didn't matter as much as volume. The prince's guards scattered, seeking cover. "Run!" Taeyang shouted to Hana. "Find your mother!" "I will not leave you." "That's an order, princess." For once she listened. Hana ran back toward the ballroom while Taeyang held the corridor. He knew he couldn't win this fight. There were too many of them. But he could buy her time. A blast caught him in the side, burning through his formal uniform. Pain exploded across his ribs. He fell, his vision blurring. Through the haze, he saw Hyunwoo approaching with a satisfied smile. "Primitive human," the prince said. "You should have stayed out of matters that did not concern you." Taeyang tried to raise his weapon, but his hands wouldn't cooperate. He was done. At least Hana had escaped. At least thunder filled the corridor. The Empress appeared with the full royal guard, Jiwan at her side. They cut through Hyunwoo's men like a blade through silk. The prince tried to run, but Jiwan caught him, her weapon pressed against his throat. "Do not move," she growled, "or I will end you here." The Empress knelt beside Taeyang, her expression unreadable. "Foolish human. You were supposed to protect her, not die for her." "Same thing. Sometimes," he managed to say through the pain. Hana pushed through the guards and fell to her knees beside him, her hands pressing against his wound. No. You cannot die. I forbid it. Not really. Your choice, princess." Medical personnel arrived, their equipment far more advanced than anything human medicine could provide. They lifted Taeyang onto a hover stretcher, working frantically to stabilize him. The last thing he saw before darkness claimed him was Hana's face, tears streaming down her blue cheeks. He woke 3 days later in the palace medical ward. His entire torso was wrapped in regenerative bandages, and pain medication made everything feel distant and fuzzy. Jiwon sat in a chair beside his bed, her armor scratched and dented from battle. "You survived," she said. "The doctor said it was close." "What happened?" "Hana, the princess is safe. The assassination attempt failed." Jiwon's expression was grim satisfaction. "Prince Hyunwoo has confessed to everything. Both assassination attempts were his work. He wanted Princess Hana dead before the marriage so he could claim her territories through conquest rather than alliance." "He confessed? Just like that?" The Empress can be very persuasive when motivated. She also had evidence gathered by a certain human who spent weeks investigating despite orders to simply guard the princess. Jiwon smiled slightly. "Turns out your paranoid observations were documented well enough to build a case." Taeyang tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. "Where's Hana?" "Dealing with political fallout. Hyunwoo's confession has created a crisis. The Keltharian Empire is claiming he acted alone, that they had no knowledge of his plans. But trust is broken. The marriage alliance is void. Good. Perhaps. But it also means the fragile peace between empires is shattered. War is possible, even likely." Jiwon stood. "The Empress wishes to see you when you are recovered. She has something to discuss." 2 days later, Taeyang was well enough to walk, though his side still ached. Guards escorted him to the Empress's private chambers, where he found Mirai and Hana in deep conversation. They stopped talking when he entered. "Sit before you fall down," Mirai commanded. "You look terrible." "Thank you, Your Majesty." "You know how to make a man feel special." Despite everything, Hana almost smiled. She looked exhausted, but there was something different in her eyes, a strength that hadn't been there before. "You were right about the prince," Mirai said. About the threats within my court, about the need for paranoia. You saved my daughter's life twice now, and you exposed a conspiracy that would have torn my empire apart. Just doing my job. No. You went far beyond your duty as Bladebound. The Empress stood and walked to the window, looking out at her empire. I have made decisions. First, the Bladebound obligation is fulfilled. You have shed blood and risked death. The law is satisfied. You are free to leave if you choose. Taiyang's heart sank. Free. He could go back to his simple life, his cargo hauler, his solitude. He could leave this complicated world of politics and danger. He should want that. But when he looked at Hana, he knew he didn't want to leave at all. Second, Mirai continued, I am offering you a new position, not as Bladebound, but as advisor to the crown. You would help guide the empire, bring your human perspective to our stagnant thinking. You would stand beside my daughter not as a servant, but as an equal. Mother, Hana started, her voice full of hope and fear. Let me finish. Mirai turned to face them both. The marriage alliance is broken. Hana is free to choose her own path within certain limits. She will rule someday, and she needs someone she can trust absolutely. Someone who sees her as a person, not a political tool. The Empress's eyes fixed on Taiyang, someone who would die to protect her. Multiple times, apparently. Taiyang looked at Hana. She was staring at him with barely concealed emotion, waiting for his answer. What if I said yes? He asked quietly. What would that mean for her? For us? It would mean you stay, Hana whispered. It would mean we face whatever comes next together. It would also mean, Mirai added with unexpected gentleness, that you accept everything that comes with that choice. The politics, the danger, the constant scrutiny. My daughter is not free to love simply as humans might. Her relationships affect empires. Can you accept that burden? Taiyang thought about his old life. The loneliness. The emptiness. Then he thought about the past weeks, the frustration, yes, but also, the announcement shocked the entire empire. Empress Mirai stood before the assembled courts of multiple civilizations and invoked an ancient law that most scholars thought was purely ceremonial. The right of champion, a trial that would determine the fate of treaties, honor, and justice. Instead of accepting the Keltharian Empire's claim that Prince Hyunwoo acted alone, Mirai demanded proof through challenge. If her champion could defeat theirs in a series of trials testing wisdom, courage, and leadership, Hyunwoo's guilt would be recognized across the galaxy. If her champion failed, the Keltharians could claim their innocence and demand reparations. The stakes were enormous, and Mirai's chosen champion was a human cargo pilot. This is insane, Taiyang said, pacing the strategy room. I'm not a champion. I'm just someone who got lucky a few times. Luck is a skill, Jiwon replied, studying the trial protocols. And the Empress did not choose you by accident. These trials are designed to test what makes a true leader, not just a warrior. You have already proven yourself in ways most Valerians cannot. Sunwoo, the young scholar who had befriended Taiyang, spread documents across the table. The trials follow ancient tradition. First is the trial of wisdom. You must solve a problem that has no obvious answer. Second is the trial of courage. You face a genuine threat. Third is the trial of leadership. You must command others in a crisis. And if I fail, you will be executed as a troublemaker, Sunwoo said matter-of-factly. And Princess Hana will be forced to acknowledge Hyunwoo's innocence, which would require her to continue the marriage alliance to preserve honor. Taiyang stopped pacing. So no pressure. Hana entered the room, dressed in formal robes, but looking more determined than he'd ever seen her. I have faith in you, Taiyang. You have never failed me. There's a first time for everything. She crossed to him and took his hands. Do you remember what you told me when we were hiding in the asteroids? You said being human means doing the right thing even when it's stupid. This is not stupid. This is necessary, and you are the only one who can do it. The trials began 3 days later in the Grand Arena, a massive structure that could hold 100,000 spectators. Representatives from dozens of civilizations attended, curious to see a human challenge Valerian tradition. The Keltharian Empire sent their champion, a warrior named Kangmin, enhanced with genetic modifications and trained from birth for combat. The trial of wisdom came first. Both champions were presented with an impossible scenario. A ship carrying refugees would crash in 1 hour. There were 2 possible landing sites. One would save more lives but destroy a city. The other would save fewer people but preserve infrastructure critical to millions. The Keltharian champion answered immediately with mathematical precision, choosing the option that maximized total survival across years of projections. His answer was logical, efficient, and perfectly Valerian in its cold calculation. Taeyang listened to the scenario and thought about the people he'd known. Refugees fleeing violence, families torn apart by choices made by others, the human cargo captain who had saved him despite having no logical reason to do so. Neither option, he said finally. I'd use the ship's remaining fuel to reach a third location, one that no one thought possible but might work with desperate flying and luck. Because sometimes the impossible answer is the right one when both logical choices are wrong. The judges argued for hours. His answer violated the parameters of the test. But it also showed the kind of creative thinking that had saved Princess Hana twice. In the end, they declared both champions successful in different ways. The first trial was a draw. The trial of courage was simpler and more direct. Both champions would face a genuine threat in the arena, a creature from a death world large and deadly, angry from captivity. They would face it one at a time, armed with only basic weapons. The Keltharian champion went first. He fought with perfect technique, his enhanced speed and strength allowing him to kill the creature efficiently. It was an impressive display of raw power and training. Then it was Taeyang's turn. The creature they released for him was different, larger, faster, more aggressive. The Keltharians had chosen a deadlier specimen, a subtle violation of the rules that the judges overlooked. Taeyang stood in the center of the arena with a simple blade and looked at the creature charging toward him. It had too many limbs, too many teeth, and moved faster than anything that size should move. Every instinct screamed at him to run. Instead, he remembered what Jiwan had taught him about Valerian combat. He remembered his own experiences surviving against impossible odds. And he remembered something else. Sometimes courage wasn't about winning. Sometimes it was about doing what needed to be done regardless of the cost. He didn't try to kill the creature immediately. Instead, he studied it, dodging its attacks, learning its patterns. The crowd grew restless, thinking him a coward. But Taeyang was counting, timing, waiting for the perfect moment. When it came, he moved, not with the polished technique of a trained warrior, but with the desperate efficiency of someone who'd survived by his wits. He used the creature's own momentum against it, guided its attack into the arena wall and struck at the exposed weak point in its armor. The creature fell. Taeyang stood over it, bleeding from a dozen wounds, breathing hard but alive. The crowd erupted. Even the Keltharian representatives looked grudgingly impressed. Taeyang had faced a deadlier threat and prevailed through intelligence rather than just strength. The score was 2-0 in Taeyang's favor. The final trial was the most difficult. The trial of leadership required each champion to command a mixed squad of warriors from different species in a simulated crisis. They would be judged on strategy, adaptability, and how well they inspired their temporary teams. The Keltharian champion approached it as a military exercise. He gave clear orders, maintained discipline, and achieved the mission objective with minimal casualties. It was textbook leadership, efficient and effective. When Taeyang's turn came, he was given a squad that included species known to hate each other, warriors with conflicting combat styles, and a scenario designed to have no perfect solution. His objective was to rescue hostages while preventing civilian casualties in a crowded station. Taeyang looked at his mismatched team and remembered every crew he'd worked with, every smuggler and mechanic and desperate person trying to survive on the frontier. He didn't give orders like a military commander. He talked to them like people. "I know you don't trust each other," he said to the squad. "I know you think this human has no right to command you. You're probably right. But those hostages don't care about our politics or our pride. They just want to live. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to use our differences as strengths instead of weaknesses." He assigned tasks based on each warrior's natural abilities, not their official roles. He asked for input, adjusted plans on the fly, and when everything went wrong halfway through, he didn't panic. He adapted, improvised, and trusted his team to do the same. The rescue succeeded with 0 casualties, but more importantly, his squad emerged looking at each other with new respect. They'd worked together despite their differences, and it had worked better than any of them expected. The judges debated the results. The Keltharian champion had been more professional, more traditionally correct in his leadership. But Taiyang had achieved something harder. He'd united divided people and inspired them to be better than they thought they could be. Finally, the lead judge stood. The trials are complete. In matters of wisdom, both champions showed merit. In courage, the human proved superior. In leadership, the judge paused. The human showed us something we had forgotten. That true leadership is not about perfect commands, but about bringing out the best in those you lead. The verdict was unanimous. Taiyang had won. The political earthquake was immediate. Prince Hyunwoo's crimes were officially recognized. The Keltharian Empire was forced to acknowledge their heir had attempted murder and conspiracy. Treaties had to be renegotiated. Trade agreements were suspended. War seemed inevitable, but Empress Mirai had anticipated this. In the chaos of diplomatic crisis, she proposed something revolutionary. A new alliance structure where all species, including humanity and other lesser civilizations, would have equal voice in galactic governance. No more hierarchies based on technological advancement or cultural supremacy. True partnership. It was radical. It was controversial. But after watching a human cargo pilot defeat their best champion through creativity and heart, many were willing to consider that perhaps the old ways needed to change. In the Empress's private chambers, Mirai finally revealed her full plan to Taiyang and Hana. I chose you precisely because you are human, she told Taiyang. My empire has grown stagnant. We've been the dominant power for so long that we've forgotten how to grow, how to adapt. We needed someone from outside to shake our foundations. You used me, Taiyang said, but without real anger. He understood now. I used you. I also gave you exactly what you wanted, the chance to protect my daughter and prove that humans deserve respect. Mirai smiled. We both got what we needed. What happens now? Hana asked. Now you learned a rule. Both of you.